Volkswagen Board of Directors, and we are the JDPC consulting firm that you guys hired as a PR consultant on the issue we will be talking about.
Excellent. Begin when you're ready.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen from the Volkswagen Board of Directors. We are the JDPC PR consulting firm. My name is Ned Gresham. We are here today to speak about the Volkswagen animal testing. So as I said, we are the JDPC PR consulting firm, and we are so happy to be here with you today. And we are going to be discussing this late January New York Times article that implicated Volkswagen along with two other major car manufacturing brands in an animal testing scandal. Now, this isn't the Volkswagen we all know about and love and keep near to our hearts. For me, Volkswagen was my first car, a 02 Jetta. And you know why? Because my parents wanted a safe and reliable way for me to get from home to school to soccer practice and then back home, representing a brand with great values. Now, and those values are highlighted right here in this video, and how consumers perceive Volkswagen. Great. Now, however, this article highlighted some things that don't really make Volkswagen seem like the ethical and reliable car that we want the consumer confidence to have. This article also mentioned that Volkswagen created and completely funded their own independent scientific research organization called the EUGT, which was made and created in order to advance their own political agenda of showing diesel's environmental safety. Additionally, this article showed that Volkswagen put 10 macaque monkeys into an airtight chamber and then pumped those same chambers full of the exhaust fumes from a Ford F-250 as well as a Volkswagen Beetle for up to 4 hours at a time. This, combined with after a consumer sees that commercial that was released by Volkswagen just about a year ago, has destroyed consumer confidence in the brand and will, and as you will eventually see in our presentation, just how much so. So today we are going to go over the ethical, legal, and financial dimensions of this animal testing scandal, but as well as provide our solution, which is going to turn this negative news into a positive light for Volkswagen's long-term brand reputation. I'm going to pass it now over to my friend and colleague Jack Giza, who's going to go over the ethical dimension.
Thank you, Ned. As you said, I will break down the ethical dimensions of the problem. In this situation, we have a couple that we do have to identify. So first, I'm going to go over the facts of the case. As Ned said, monkeys were exposed to nitric oxide in these tanks for countless hours. Second, endoscopes, which I'll get into later, were used to perform numerous and frequent experiments and tests on the monkeys to check up on how they were doing. And finally, also an important note, the results were never released publicly by VW or the facility that administered the tests. So first of all, the physical effects. According to the American Lung Association, nitric oxide has been known to cause base breaks in DNA strands, which can be potentially mutagenic or cause organ failure within species. And in addition, when nitric oxide reacts with oxygen in our lungs, it can create nitrogen dioxide, which is a known pulmonary irritant and also one of the problems that America has seen with diesel emissions in the past. Up in the right corner, we have the endoscope that I referred to earlier. This is a long tube with a camera on the end that was used on the monkeys. It was shoved down their windpipes through their nose or their mouths to get a better view of their lungs and the reactions that their lungs were having from the nitric oxide. Because as Ned said earlier, the goals of this test were to promote a more positive public image on the diesel emissions because of what happened in the past when we got in trouble in America with our diesel emissions. Yes. Second, based on the endoscopes, they were given violent examinations, the monkeys were, and one of the doctors, I was actually on site at the facility in Albuquerque, was quoted saying the researchers performing the test noted that the animals were stressed due to their frequent and violent examinations. So basically what this shows is that VW was aware of the negative nature of these tests and how they were inflicting pain on these monkeys, as well as the negative harm that this gas can have on these monkeys, yet they continued to instill these tests with really no reason at all. This brings me to the point of the fact they never released it. This can relate back to the 1960s when the sugar industry had a big problem. There was new reports coming out about sugar being unhealthy, and they wanted to stop that to promote sales. So they paid Harvard professors to write Harvard articles stating that sugar was not nearly as bad for you as people thought, which increased the sales of the sugar industry. VW is trying to give off this wrong image that diesel is okay, when in turn we can see all these negative effects that they're causing. In addition, trends in scientific studies have leaned more towards monkeys having characteristics more similar to humans than we've ever imagined before, including some other monkeys. Some of the publications by our own Dr. White include these studies that monkeys are now able, we now know that many monkeys are self-aware, they have the capacity to feel pain and suffering, and the capacity to value their own life. So once these three characteristics come into play, we have to treat them a little bit differently than most animals, similar to the SeaWorld case. I'm sure many of you are familiar with what happened with SeaWorld and how they got in trouble for the capture of orcas and for the public's enjoyment. However, this problem didn't arise for many years. SeaWorld was very successful until scientific studies came out showing that orcas were much more intelligent than we knew before, and that they had the capacity to feel the pain and suffering from being entrapped in these tanks. In addition, these acts can create problems in the future based on a contradictory viewpoint as our company. In the past, we've had consistent CSR efforts, including in Mexico, where we put over $4 million into the preservation of biodiversity, as well as reforestation and helping local communities. This is a complete contradiction of what we're doing with these animals in New Mexico. How can we be testing on living species while also fighting for the preservation of biodiversity? Consumers want a positive public brand image from us, and they want it to be consistent through all of our efforts. This also brings me to my next point, that VW does not possess a mission statement, something that can really lay the groundwork for a positive corporate culture, and something that we may look into in the future. They do possess a code of conduct, but it is very vague and only touches on a few subjects that we would like to touch on. I'll now pass it on to my colleague Mitchell Sigismund to walk you through the financials of this problem.
Thank you, Jack. As Jack said, my name is Mitchell Sigismund. I will be discussing the financial ramifications of Volkswagen. Before I get into that, I want to discuss the demographics of the Volkswagen consumer. The first and most important number is the age of our consumers. It's 47.5 years old for our average consumer, which is the second lowest age amongst car purchasers. Second, we produce roughly 11 million vehicles per year. And lastly, the most important statistic is this number right here, which is a 17.5%. This represents our market share of millennials, which is the age group of 18 to 34, which has an unprecedented emphasis on consumer confidence as well as ethical companies. Because we have such a high percentage of our sales directly to this age group, we need to in turn make our marketing consistent with that age group. So what I'm going to discuss is the already recognized effects from when the scandal broke and potential effects that could happen to the company if we do not fix it. So right here, this story broke on January 22nd, and as of the end of March, it was down 12.39% from where our company started on January 22nd. This is fairly bad because we're losing 12.39% of our company. But that hails in comparison to what could happen if we don't adjust this. Here is a representation of what happened at the diesel emission scandal to where it could lead it back in 2015. We lost 54% of our company value back then. We've only lost 12% now, which means we are technically open to another loss of a third of Volkswagen's company in value if we don't do something about it now. A few numbers I'd like to highlight to show that this is actually taking effect are our sales from February, a full month after people have already heard this, and how it's affected consumer confidence. The first number I'd like to point out is this number here. Our total Jetta family is our most popular selling vehicle, and as you can see, it's down 42.7% from February of 2017 to February of 2018. Also, our total Beetle family is down 24.3%, and this is the iconic Volkswagen Beetle that everybody knows Volkswagen for. And lastly, our most popular car amongst female consumers is this car here, the Passat, which is down 50.3%. These are substantial numbers that have adversely affected our sale and has also affected our stock price. On January 22nd, when this story broke, we ended at $46.53 as our close. As of the end of March, we were at $40.04. This loss of $6.49 per share does not seem like a huge value until you realize the 1.48 billion shares that Volkswagen has outstanding, which yields a loss of $9.6 billion to company value already affected. With Volkswagen being a $70 billion company, losing 14% of their value from this event is a substantial number. To prove that there is a correlation between Volkswagen's diesel testing and this effect, in our index we have a slide showing the decline of the market comparatively to the decline of the auto manufacturer market compared to Volkswagen's decline. And Volkswagen's decline is substantially worse than any of the other aforementioned markets. Now I'm going to pass it on to Jackson Wright to discuss the legal ramifications of this issue.
Thanks, Mitch. I'm Jackson, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the legal dimension of this issue, which, like its other components, is multifaceted and complex. Because this is an international issue, there are two major legal bodies at play. US law, which governs the research testing facility at which these experiments were actually conducted, and because VW is headquartered in Germany, EU law is also applicable. In the US, animal testing is addressed in the Animal Welfare Act of 1966, or the AWA. This was introduced to prevent unnecessary harm to animals, but due to some glaring oversights, it actually does little to regulate animal testing conducted at research facilities. However, the Lovelace Respiratory Research Institute, where these experiments were conducted, has perpetrated numerous animal AWA violations over the past decade, namely for mistreatment of animals and failure to properly examine viable alternatives to animal testing. Now, while there aren't currently any accusations that AWA was violated during the VW testing, the questionable track record of this facility means we can't rule out the potential of future accusations of AWA violations. Furthermore, because many of these violations occurred before VW approved them as the venue for their animal testing, VW is liable to be held accountable or to be accused of gross negligence for choosing a research facility with such a questionable track record. In the EU, the legal environment surrounding animal testing is similarly complex. While it's still somewhat lenient, it's made substantial progress towards stricter animal testing laws in the past decade, namely the introduction of a law banning the sale of any cosmetics in the EU that test on animals. Now, this lenient but progressing environment provides a unique opportunity for VW for two reasons. The first is more obvious because it's still somewhat lenient. VW is not currently facing any legal repercussions for animal testing in the EU. The second reason has more to do with our solution. As you can see, since the introduction of this law and other legal progression in the EU towards stricter animal testing laws, there's been a significant decrease in animal testing in the EU, but there's still a lot of progress to be made in animal rights. So if VW can shift its stance to a position of advocacy regarding animal rights, there's ample opportunity for VW to align itself with this fight for better animal rights. This could restore consumer confidence, repair brand image, and consequently have a positive impact on our stock prices. And on an ethical front, the implementation of stricter animal testing laws would prevent any unnecessary harm to animals in the future. I'm going to move into our solution. We're going to talk a little bit more in detail about how we would actually implement this shift in position. We want to take a three-pronged approach. So this change needs to happen from the inside out. We want to ensure that the image that we're depicting to the public is consistent with the inner workings of our company. Furthermore, we're going to use our considerable influence as the #1 car manufacturer in the world to lobby directly with foreign and domestic governments for stricter animal testing laws. And finally, we want to produce and distribute a campaign to raise awareness for this fight for better animal testing laws and get more people on board. And we think that this could gain a lot of traction and legitimacy through a partnership with an already established animal rights group such as the WSPA, which is the World Society for the Protection of Animals.
So we all know Volkswagen is an international company ranging over 500 continents with their offices. But with our marketing campaign, we're going to focus on these 3 markets. The European Union, where we are headquartered, China, which is our largest market, and the United States, in order to restore consumer confidence and hopefully create an atmosphere where my kid will also be driving a Volkswagen.
So where and what to make a change? What we were thinking, because Volkswagen currently gives over $12 million to their CSR programs around the world. If they were to partner with an organization like the WSPA, who already has petitioned the UN for animal testing laws around the world, using our considerable influence and power as the biggest manufacturer for automobiles in the world, we could really enhance this company's efforts and give a positive image of our company by donating a similar value to the values we already give to our other CSR programs. And a reason why we want to do this is because CVS took this model when they were faced with a similar issue in 2014. In 2014, they were facing a lot of heat from selling cigarette products, even though they are a pharmaceutical company that is working for the betterment of health of their consumers. They did away with $100 million in profits from cigarette sales yearly to show their consumers that they care more about their health than their profits. In doing so, their stock price was subsequently awarded, and I believe that this is a great model that we should follow to gain a first mover advantage as a company, taking an ethical stance. If we don't give as much detail as CVS did to this issue, then we could end up like many other companies, which we also have in our index, the adverse effects of not listening to their consumers have set on their stock price. One thing that I want to highlight is this amazing quote from Oprah, and that is, real integrity is doing the right thing, knowing nobody will know if you did it or not. And I think this is important because we at Volkswagen have the ability to do the right thing right now. Nobody's going to know what position we take, but they will know that if we do the right thing, that is part of our company and an integral value of what we want to be as a company.
So you may be asking yourself why, even though we have told you there's negative ramifications for acting unethically as a company, there's 3 main things that really are key to having an ethical company. First of all, it avoids unnecessary risk. I'm sure you're familiar with the BP oil disaster back in 2010. It was a result of cost cutting, so safety was not met to the standards because managers were looking at the bottom line. 11 people died and millions and millions of gallons were spilled into the Gulf, causing many people to be out of jobs and lose a lot of money in the long run. We don't want to be like BP and end up with this major disaster. Second, long-term reputation. Like I said before, consumers want a consistent ethical brand image with the companies they're going to be buying products from because we want to stick with that company through the remainder of our lives. I'm sure there's many products that all of us in the room have purchased because it's the same brand that we have in the past and we trust the brand, not only for their quality product, but because we know the brand has a good values. And lastly, ethical business attracts talent. As an employee of a company, if you work for a company that acts unethically, who's to say that they won't do the same towards you? If you work for a company that has strong core values, strong ethical values, you feel more valued within the company and it attracts more talent within. Also, talented people often ask colleagues for recommendations on where to work. If you're in a situation with a good business culture, why would you not offer that recommendation? But the main reason why we should be acting this way is because it's the right thing to do for VW. If you have any questions, please address them to us at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a good presentation, and you've told us what we mean to do in terms of a publicly facing action because of a second scandal that we're involved in
Mhm.
Hertz. Well, it's not your remit necessarily. Part of the issue is somebody screwed up in Volkswagen. This is not just a publicly, we're not just publicly saying do nice things. So do you have any recommendations on what to do internally in Volkswagen? Since clearly we had the diesel problem, we have another diesel problem, there is something within the corporation that's unwell.
I would actually like to answer that question by going back to the fact that we do not have a statement of values, and we have a very vague code of conduct at Volkswagen. I think employing a strong statement of values that would address these issues will make it so our company has a model to follow, and we don't just have these vague guidelines where people can step around them internally in the company. If we have company values that strictly highlight that we need to be an ethical company on the edge of societal change and making sure that we're doing the best things for our consumers, we will not have issues like this going forward. As of right now, we don't have that, and we're seeing employees in Volkswagen taking advantage of that. So I think it really comes down to implementing a mission statement that'll change that issue.
And these statements need to be like obviously easily accessible for the employees, not only internally but externally. Right now, we don't have a mission statement like Mitch said. We have a code of conduct. It's on our sustainability report. We have to do a good deal of digging to find that. These should be very accessible and instilled in the employees so they can behave in a way that's consistent with Volkswagen's values.
But to address the internal problem, that yes, we did have an issue within Volkswagen, and having these new code of conduct isn't going to change the whole company. The executives that were involved with the EUGT and overseeing these tests were removed. Second of all, we would, with this new code of conduct, instill a training policy, so that way it wouldn't just be this blanket on a website that says this is what we're about, but really if you ask an employee in a factory, he's not going to know that.
And sorry, just to add that, like similarly, Starbucks did that with their employees. They shut down 8,000 stores because of the racial bias that happened very recently. And therefore, I think that doing something like that, really like letting our customers know that we're willing to shut down our operations to make sure that all of our employees understand the ethical importance of our company, I think will show our consumers exactly the type of company we are. Sorry.
I want to follow up on Mr. Goldman's comment. Regarding the research at Lovelace, I believe, did you say it was 10 years ago? Or it's been 10 years?
In the past decade since.
So how come we're just learning of this now? And I guess my second question to that is Lovelace a contracted facility or is it a VW facility?
It is an independent facility contracted by VW, and all these instances of violations were fairly easily accessible online. So I'd imagine VW or whoever made the decision to approve this venue was aware of the violations in the past.
In the work that you did, I appreciate your communications consulting firm, but in the work you did, were you able to ascertain who was responsible for the relationship with this third party and how that third party was managed?
We were unable to find exactly who internally in the company decided to contract with this Lovelace Research Institute.
Well, as we said at the beginning, the EUGT was established for specific tests on diesel. So it was not VW acting directly with Lovelace. It was a VW Institute, EUGT with VW employees on the board of it that were directing this effort. So most of the stuff was between Lovelace and UGT, but VW oversaw UGT a large part, along with two other departments.
And I guess related to that, I appreciate that we operate in the U.S. and in European countries. But I guess I am wondering what was the role of the IBECC as far as the research that was done with the animals. My understanding is that's their role to opine and review the efficacy and humane treatment of animals in the work they do.
I don't know the specific role, but I researched the laws in the EU, and they're similar to the US laws and that there are some loopholes. Essentially, if you're performing tests on an animal at a research facility, you need to establish that it's for the advancement of science. So if you say that you couldn't administer anesthetic because it was for scientific advancement, they don't, especially established research facilities with these licenses and these permits, they don't really search further than a written. You need to produce a document that establishes why you needed to perform this way. But beyond that, there's not a lot of regulation.
Okay. I do have another question. If I understood you, one of the recommendations is around advocating animal rights. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I guess we do manufacture products that include animal products like leather seats, leather steering wheels. How would that play into our advocacy and animal rights campaign?
I think people will, yeah, I know it would be contradictory, but I think people will kind of overlook those amenities of the car when they see, and also with leather, we could do a synthetic material like pleather, plastic leather, which has the same effect. Obviously does not make the vehicle as nice, but there is alternatives to that. And yeah, it's really all.
So, sorry to go off of that. Basically what the main focus was that the fact that these monkeys possess these characteristics similar to humans, so they have a capacity to feel this pain and suffering more so than a cow who's providing this leather does. So the monkeys sitting in these chambers are experiencing knowledgeable pain and suffering, and they value their own lives unlike a livestock does because they hold the characteristics of this just specific animals in nature do that are similar to humans, whereas a majority of the animal kingdom does not possess them.
And then going off that, partnering with an organization like the WSPA, which advocates for all animal rights, will limit our exposure when we do still have leather seats and stuff, because we are saying that we're working on advocating for all animal rights, and we're going to do our best to implement changes in the future. And I think it does start with the animals that we know that have human qualities, that we need to address those first. And as research comes out more and more that maybe cows that produce leather, they may feel the same pain these monkeys do. Once that research comes out, then I think we have to really get the next step forward of moving on that front. But as for now, I think just addressing the research at hand, that the cow monkeys, they do feel pain, they do understand suffering, and they do have other similarities to the human experience. That needs to be addressed right now.
Did you find other examples of animal testing in the context of the automotive industry? The automotive industry utilizing animals as live subjects, substitutes for humans, to do testing and assess hypotheses or solve problems?
Not to the extent of putting them in airtight chambers and then with the endoscopes down their throats. Not to this extent.
Yeah, and to go off of that, at that point where we're substituting animals for humans, these animals still feel the same pain that we do as humans. So why would we, like ethically, why would we be okay with doing something that can't communicate with us but feels the same pain, but not willing to do it ourselves? I think that's the main ethical issue here at hand, that we're doing it to animals that feel the pain that we feel, but do not communicate with us the way that we communicate. So we can see the pain and the suffering that they're feeling on their faces, but we are still doing that because we would rather see it done to somebody else than to ourselves as humans. And that right there is the whole ethical issue, that we're doing it to something that can't communicate.
Not to mention, before we previously stated that these tests are usually only accepted if it provides positive health for humans. So if it was to break through on a disease or something, then animal testing would be accepted. However, these testing had no positive gain for public, for health, for humans in general, for VW even. It had really no outcome that was positive in any way for any party involved.
Given, and you may not know the answer, but given the EU's obligation that you can do animal testing if there's a benefit and nothing can happen, is VW liable legally now over this event?
Well, because the testing was done in Albuquerque, New Mexico, I don't believe the EU law is even applied to Volkswagen because the testing wasn't done in the EU. And I also know that legally, there is nothing that we violated, because there are ways that you can get around saying that there is no benefit, because on I forget the name was, the ALA, I think, American Lung Association, or whoever has the laws about it, they literally say you can get around it if it benefits society for any number of reasons, and you can just pick one. You could say it benefits society because it could limit air exposure, and that right there, okay, you can do whatever you want according to the laws as they are now, which makes it very easy to find these loopholes like we previously stated. So,
Yeah, I don't know if there's any way to accuse someone retroactively after they're, like I said, you have to produce the document and establish why you're conducting these experiments. And then that gets approved and then you can conduct the experiment. I don't know if there's a way to accuse someone retroactively after the document's already been approved. And the experiment's been
The
conducted.
facility becomes liable for it after accepting the documentation permitting the test. So the facility now says, yeah, you can have these tests based on this basis. If the basis isn't met, it's not VW's problem for going to, it's the facility's problem for allowing that to happen at their location.
And you have a recommendation about what we should do about the organization that we formed for testing, that joint organization?
So what I was just actually about to say was that Volkswagen, you guys did a very good job with covering your tracks because of this independent research organization. You got Volkswagen, it was actually dissolved. It dissolved itself, probably also from Volkswagen, in 2017 before this was released. So now even it was already an independent research organization that just a bunch of Volkswagen executives sat on. So it's not tied to Volkswagen.
So why do we tell the public where there can be a view? We not only seem not to care, we then try to cover our tracks after a previous dishonest diesel event.
But I think to answer your question, it really goes back to what our main point, our solution is. Partnering with an organization like the WSPA, which has already petitioned the United Nations for animal testing laws around the world. Partnering with an organization like that will show the public that we truly are trying to move past our past, which has been littered with scandals. And partnering with an organization like that, which does need some help, they petition the UN, but the UN ignores them because they don't have enough oomph. They don't have any backing behind them. Partnering with us here at Volkswagen, being the leading auto manufacturer in the world, will provide them a lot more backing, and that will give the public a better image of our company because of the fact that we've not only partnered with an organization to benefit them, but benefits the entire world based on something that we realized was going on at our facility, which we had to disband because we recognized the painful effects it was causing, and we don't ever want to do that again. So I think instead of saying it disbanded and we're covering our tracks, we could say something more like, we disbanded this company because we recognized what was happening. And when we recognized that, we then shifted our focus to partnering with an organization to make sure this never happens again.
As VW did release a statement already, they dissolved the organization and they released the liaison between VW and the EUGT, and they essentially said that it was because they weren't acting consistently with VW's values, which is a positive way to frame it. And I believe they should release another statement admitting their fault that they did not properly oversee this employee. They weren't fully aware of what was going on, and they will be more thorough in the future with their observing these situations.
If you have crystallized recommendations of VW into 3 or 4 clear recommendations, what are they?
I would say,
What do we need to stop doing? Start doing, do more, do less.
okay, so stop doing is we need to disband this entire diesel escapade. We need to stop trying to make diesel seem like it's positive for the public light, and we need to stop all testing regarding that position. What we need to do is we need to partner with an organization like the WSPA to really move forward and give ourselves a better CSR image with the company. Doing more, I think in the short interim, doing more CSR to really put ourselves back in the public spotlight and to show that we act ethically as a company is what we need to do. And also with that, do more also train our employees more on our ethical values. do less is just doing less things that could be considered unethical and could be controversial in the future. And I know that's a very vague thing of how do you know what's controversial, but I think I think that goes to having a mission statement. If we ask ourselves, does this contradict our mission statement? Absolutely no. And we need to establish a mission statement.
And I think furthermore, we should implement a plan. Like Mitch said earlier, these can't all be sudden changes. Obviously, we can dissolve the EUGT, we can stop any further animal testing, but there are issues like the leather seats that cannot be stopped immediately. So we should implement a plan that kind of delineates how we're going to move away from this unnecessary animal harm in the future. So consumers will kind of rebuild that trust and recognize that we're doing what we can for animal rights.
Okay. Gentlemen, thanks. Let's talk about a couple of things. We've got a lot to talk about, okay?
Oh man.
Okay, so.
Oh, good job.
Just, no, you wouldn't want it that way anyway. You wonder why they bother coming, okay? Okay, so I have to detach from the fact that I'm an engineer, and I grew up admiring and thinking Germans are the best engineers in the world. This whole behavior and sequence of things by Volkswagen making my head explode. Okay, it is remarkable. Engineers, if you're asked one, you can't. I'm sitting here. You know, what do? We solve problems. We often forget to mention we often are the ones who create the problem in the first place. But it's ultimately about how do you solve the problem. And I'm just aghast that Volkswagen chose to solve the problem or approach the problem the way they did. Okay, so that part aside is crazy. You guys made a number of really good points. I love your sugar example in the beginning, okay? So I'm going to talk about, in the context of a couple things, about how you present to folks who are substantial stakeholders in you're advising them on substantive decisions, okay, like a board. So we'll talk about how you talk to them, how you don't talk to them, but also in terms of how you influence and add leverage and credibility to your arguments, okay? So using examples from other industries, even better from your own industry, is powerful. Okay, you touched on it's Mitchell, right?
Yes, sir.
You touched on a critical point that again amazes me about Volkswagen in a non-good way. The fact that they don't have mission statements, they don't have codes and other types of things that really create a foundation or a framework by what they should and should not be doing. It's stunning that they don't have those things. And in the context of your recommendation, it's a huge glaring gap. Okay, so it's good that you're aware of those things, and you guys sometimes struggle to think on your feet in Q&A, that you would scramble and come up with these things as well. But I want to go back to the part about using examples. So using examples from the owner of some similar industries. The other thing is, as an engineer, I immediately find myself putting the problem-solving mode and thinking about how I would try to solve this problem. And it's stunning to me they would use animal research to do so. I mean, animal research is just not in the domain of what the automotive industry ought to begin. It's incredible to me that would even be the case. And simple environmental constituents like nitrous oxide, this is not hard. Nitrous oxide has been around for a long time. It's part of the environment, it's part of the pollutants, and so on. I like you were playing like a fiddle with your chemical equation in the beginning, by the way. Thank you for that. Nobody else cared, but I was all about it. So there was a real basket of strengths and some gaps or weaknesses, okay? So that's why I asked you at the end, crystallize it down to 3 or 4 things. Tell me the 3 or 4 things you want me to do, stop doing or start doing, okay? I probably shouldn't have qualified it, because then you tried to fill in each of those 4 areas, and that was my mistake, so I shouldn't have asked you that question that way. But even with 15 minutes to talk to us, 30 minutes for presentation, time for Q&A and so forth, boil it down. Get it down to the key points that you want us to take away from, okay? At times your presentation was confusing and hard to follow, okay? And some of you guys, at different points you would do it well, and other times you would struggle with it. So it was kind of hard to follow and stay on top of. So keep that in mind. What do I want my audience to hear? What do I want to drive home to my audience that really makes their decision clear, okay, in terms of what we're trying to do? That part I had a hard time with throughout, but you had a lot of things that collectively could have been put together to form that basis, okay? This was a good topic to choose for a variety of reasons. Most importantly, because animal testing affects a broad variety of industries. And it's remarkable to me in hindsight when you look at black and white videos or so forth, some of the things we do that are done over the years to animals. I'm just stunned by the fact that VW would even consider animal testing in the context of this problem. But I get the board thing. I'm going to stop for right now. I think some more thoughts on the issue.
It was very well done. There's a lot that you tried to cover.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it could be better if you begin by concisely laying out the problem, which to me is, here's a newspaper article, you've had a scandal. This is your second scandal about diesel recently. Your first scandal dropped your price. Your next one seems to be doing the same thing. And to show the slide from the multiple industries saying, and that's not just because the stock market's going down, Volkswagen's doing badly. It suggests two things. One, there's something wrong with Volkswagen. There's a sickness in your company if these kind of scandals can happen. And two, you need to get the public confidence back and then go into explain. But you do need to address, and it's difficult to tell the board, but basically something's wrong with, there's a sickness in the company if this happens over and over again. And whatever they did for the first one didn't address the sickness in the company. I was going to ask, but we didn't get to. How are you going to? So you have a value statement and you have a mission. How are you going to enforce it?
Well, I think like the example that Starbucks is doing, where they're literally closing 8,000 stores to train their employees for a day about non-racial bias. I think doing that with our Volkswagen employees and the subsidiaries that sell our cars would be great, because not only are we going to affect all the different automotive sellers that we have, we're also going to change the company internally, where the problem probably originates from. And I think literally shutting down our stores, and whether it's for a day or a week, like sending everybody to a mandatory training session to discuss the ethical implications would be the best idea.
So you also might want to consider also that the board seriously consider making ethical performance by the CEO and senior leadership an important part of their future pay and longevity in the company.
Absolutely.
Something that basically the board can turn to the public and say, it matters. Here's how it matters. And this is what we're going to do. We didn't address whether or not there's something culturally different about a company who began in Germany, lives in Germany, and is basically the German culture coming to America versus an American company and its culture moving across the world to somewhere else. And I don't know how much that plays. There have been articles about that. That's a different discussion. But this is basically, you took on a very difficult topic and did it well. And it's, so I give you kudos. And your ability to talk and pass it back and forth was very well done.
Well, I want to echo what my fellow judges have said. You all did a really nice job. I thought it was a really nice presentation. This was a tough topic, and it was multifaceted. And so I agree that you all, your presence, when I was your age, did not have that presence to stand up and speak like that. So I am kudos to all four of you. I agree your ability to play off one another, pass things off, and even handling the questions. Yes, I asked some tough questions, but I'm going to be honest with you. You had like 25, 30 minutes to do a presentation in a board uninterrupted. And I realize this is a competition. That generally doesn't happen. Your board is going to interrupt you left and right, which is actually, I've come to appreciate, is a good thing. It means you have their attention, they're engaged, and they're going to ask you tough questions. But you were on your feet, and even if you couldn't answer the question, you didn't have it all, I have to say, the two of you in particular handling some of the questions about the research, you just were like this, trying to, pull it together. No, it's good, that's what you have to do. And when you're in front of a board, you're not gonna always have all the answers, but the one thing you always have in your back pocket is, I will get back to you. You may not always have it, but you can get back to them, you will look into it. I think, the one thing I would say is you presented yourselves as a communication firm, and so sometimes I got lost a little bit with thinking about how you were presenting it, because I think of communications, a communication consulting firm that's more about like how it's presented to the public, the image. And so then I sort of started to wonder, is this more about the image to the public, or is this about us as a company and our culture? And, you know, I think that I also heard some interchange of some language. And I know this is hard because this is a case competition and you're passionate and you really, like, you knew your stuff. I mean, you really did know your stuff, and kudos to you. But every once in a while I'd hear we, and I thought they're consultants. So this is the one thing I will tell you, when you're in an organization, if you hire a consultant, that is the one sort of weapon you can bring in to deliver a bad message. They don't live in the organization and they get to walk away, but they're the ones who, sometimes organizations will hire a consultant to be the one who delivers the message and does, if you will, the dirty work in that. The one thing I would say, and I didn't know this case, is when I asked about Lovelace and 10 years ago. So if I were in the organization and I didn't know that, and I didn't, I'm pretending I didn't. Maybe they did, but it was kind of like, what did you do 10 years ago? It's kind of like it just sat there and nothing happened. That's a problem. Who's responsible for that? Because the board's going to say, who's responsible and what did we do with them? Why are they still here? I think the other thing I would say, you know, yes, I asked you some tough questions about sort of the dichotomy of, you know, we're going to be animal rights activists now, but we use leather products. Because I can tell you, okay, so my background is I'm a nurse and a lawyer, and I serve as a chief compliance officer, and I've been in healthcare and academia, and I've dealt a lot with animal research. So in full disclosure, I know a lot about IBECC, at least in the US. I don't know about, you know, what happens in Europe and other countries, but I do know that I can tell you in the US, animal research, those animals are protected better than humans for research on human subjects. Those laws protecting them are like really, they really do look at it. Now, I can't speak for the automotive industry and sort of how that relates to it, but that was the frame of reference I came from. And I also know that organizations, whether you're talking about PETA, they would be all over Volkswagen if they're all of a sudden going to say we're animal rights activists, but we use leather products.
Right.
And if they're not going to, PETA is not going to care that this particular monkey is more like a human than a cow.
You might be getting to that point about, as a PR firm, you're here to talk about external facing. Address that directly with the board, basically saying, if all you do is fix how we look outside and don't fix what's sick inside the company, that will fail, because you will not have fixed your underlying problem. So we have chosen to address both for you, to highlight why it's important to do this in order to make that successful. The other thing that you can just file away and use at all, I don't know if you'd ever say this to the Volkswagen board.
What were you thinking?
The laws around animal testing and human testing are around, well, especially human testing, are around informed consent, and arose from things that happened during World War II. And animals can't give informed consent.
That's why they have better board protection.
Volkswagen may be more susceptible to the anger of the public because there may be an emotional connection in the back of their mind with other experiments that happened a long time ago that are associated with Germany. And so it would behoove
backstory there.
but it would behoove Volkswagen to be ultra sensitive because it makes them ultra successful.
I want to talk about a couple more points. First of all, your point about if you screw up once, okay, that's one thing. If you screw up twice, as mentioned, there's a fundamental gap. There's a problem. And as you highlighted, the absence of the types of statements and guiding principles is a generic symptom of a problem. And in that context, it is a remarkable case that such a thing would even happen. The animal testing piece is both that we discussed. it's pretty crazy. So, great choice of case. Just a couple, and the point about consultants is I work with consultants all the time, and they range the gamut about how effective they are. And that's for another time. But as you mentioned, one of the things consultants can do is they can tell it like it is, unlike anybody internally. And they can speak truth to power in a far more effective way, because at the end of the day, that's what they're paid to do. So if you work for consultants sometimes, that's part of your why you're there, to provide an independent, objective, insightful reflection of the company in terms of whatever you're in charge to deliver. So when you talk to boards, okay, always remember it is a formal environment. It's a formal, highly structured environment. And at the end of the day, you're advising and making recommendations what are otherwise going to be very difficult decisions. And anything that gets to the board level in terms of decisions or direction is very substantive and important. I mean, boards only make decisions, if ever, a couple times a year. Typically, they partner with the CEO and the leadership of the company, which are hired to make decisions, are weighing in. But boards make very few decisions. They're informed, that's about it. It's ultimately, boards may only make decisions in the context of hiring and firing a CEO or his or her immediate staff. So when you get to that level, it's a very formal, very well developed argument. We've read Stewart a couple of times. But most importantly, as you point out, it comes back to who am I, what are we about, and where did we go wrong? So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I'll just add to that about the code of conduct and the values. I know you mentioned either they didn't have it or it was insufficient. Maybe it's recommending what it is. And I will also tell you, just serving in-house in the capacity that I do as a chief compliance officer, training's great. Training's a first step. Training doesn't solve the problem completely. And I appreciate you bringing up Starbucks, but at the same time, I guarantee you their PR firm is driving some of what they're doing. It's not, I don't, sitting here with the Starbucks cup, I don't, disagree that Starbucks wants to do the right thing. I'm not suggesting that. But I can also tell you they've got a public image crisis right now, and they're trying to remedy that. And when an organization is faced with these types of ethical, legal, business decisions, they are tough decisions, and there's a lot of thought that goes behind it and a lot of considerations. I think one thing, I realize this is only one part of the competition, so should you have, reframe it, you might want to just think about what would you suggest for values and code that isn't, maybe that you can relate back to what you guys know from all your research on VW that might stand out, going to, I forget the slide you had with the three.
China, European Union.
No, the habitat, it was in the intro. You had a slide with three, I don't know if it's there was a slide that had three things that they, I don't know if it's part of their mission, but tying back to something that's near and dear to VW and why they're in business, or what the business was built on. That may be helpful. The other thing is just again, I don't know what the rest of the competition looks like, but should you have another opportunity to present it or think about it is, so what happened 10 years ago, just because it's a third party, that does not exclude VW or let them off the hook for what happened. And so I know in every organization I've been with, even though we may have contracts and there are contractual terms and indemnification clauses regarding third parties that are doing work on our behalf, something happens with that third party, they will no longer be a third party. And there's a reason those provisions are in a contract. So when I ask the question about, what happened 10 years ago, just think about, I don't know if you know or if it's public what happened, but you would want to think about what did VW do with that relationship? Did they terminate the relationship? We would want to think about, did they decide to monitor and put in its own kind of self-monitoring program? Because those are all parts of, if you will, compliance program to make sure that you have checks and balances of what's going on in the organization or with third parties who are operating on your behalf. So just something, food for thought, if you have another opportunity.
We're out of time. Do you have any questions for us?
How'd you guys like the presentation?
You did a great job. You did a great job. This is all meant to be constructive feedback.
We appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.